despite the fact that our product is real estate, it's all about the data. So with that, I want to introduce John Gilbert, COO of Rudin Management, who is going to moderate an amazing panel on reducing carbon, synergistic tenant and owner strategies that create real savings. So John, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you introduce the panel and share some amazing thoughts with us. So thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. That was terrific. You know, I feel I'm in true geekdom, which is a happy place for me. Well, let me introduce the judges who are part of this panel. Dana Schneider from Empire State, Matt Montañez from JP Morgan Chase, and Ed Bricker from the Durst Organization. I want to thank each of you for participating as judges and donating your time and to analyze all these submissions. It's really terrific. But before we jump into it, I really want to thank, first and foremost, NYSERDA, Ryan and Patrick. You know, this, I think the idea for this really started within the REBNY Tech Committee as we began to focus on how do we ultimately bring owners and tenants together and really understand the relationship between tenant plug load and base building operations. And this competition that you put together has really begun that conversation in a real way, and it's very, very exciting. So thank you for that. And also Yetsu and Richard over at the Building Energy Exchange, one of my favorite buildings in New York, proud to be a board member there. Thank you for hosting this. So we've got a lot to unpack. I'm going to jump right into this. My thinking, we've got 20 minutes. And my thought was to really focus on lessons learned and how do we ultimately use the data that has been shared with us to ultimately bring owners and tenants together, focus on reducing energy consumption, and ultimately also reducing the amount of carbon that's produced by the electricity that we consume. And to me, there's three main groups that we need to speak to. First and foremost, it's government. We really want to take this data, present the data to government, and help mold public policy in a way that makes sense for all parties. Second is the real estate industry in and of itself. What do we have to learn? What should we take away from this? And finally, and least but not last, is the PropTech community. So I'm going to start with you, Dana. You know, what lessons did you come away with in terms of messaging to our friends in government, ultimately focused on Local Law 97, focused on what's going on up at the state? You have some thoughts you want to share with us?
Sure, thanks, John. I think that there are so many different things we can talk about, and it's great to see presentations on data analytics. But I think there are two major messages to inform policy with the data that the people who competed today and those of us on the panel are working on every day. You know, there are two pathways for us to meet our goals as a city, as a state, as a country, and they involve both the building side and the grid side. And at the building side, I think what we've seen in all the presentations today is the importance of, number one, having data. A lot of buildings don't even have the data, you know, and I sort of provided the data to the competitors today for them to data crunch, basically. But many buildings don't even have access to complete data, and they don't know if their data is accurate or not. So I think what we learned today is that, number one, we need cost-effective, accurate ways for all buildings to have data at the whole building level and at the tenant level. And we need ways to effectively engage our tenants or the occupants, even if we're owner-occupied buildings like JP Morgan Chase may be. You know, we need to engage the people who occupy our buildings with data in a usable form, and a data in a form that enables us to develop actions and behavioral and technical actions. And then we have to be able to make a business case for investment in all of these things. So I think that's one thing you can know.
You know, action needs to be one step, or data needs to be one step away from action, right? We can collect data, but big deal, if we don't use it, ultimately to make our buildings more efficient, then shame on us. Matt, big owner occupier here in the city. What did you take away from this, and what are your thoughts, in terms of messaging to our friends in government?
Yeah, thanks, John. So first off, it's an honor to just participate in the discussion, and congrats to all the finalists and all those that participate. I would say, look, someone wise once told me the truth will set you free. And I think the data, the presentations submitted are a representation of that. So, what COVID really reminded us was to evaluate essentially what is essential versus non-essential. And the occupancy data is essential to simply respond and use common sense. I think a case in point is our current global headquarters, 383 Madison, a property that we own, operate, and occupy. Our normal pre-pandemic occupancy was, roughly 6,000. And we were recording roughly 15 to 20% of that occupancy during the peak of the pandemic. And that's probably higher than most other traditional landlords, given the nature of our business infrastructure requirements, essentially to keep our traders going. However, even with the reduced occupancy, we focused and improved our air quality and proceeded to take measures to reduce our energy costs. We closed off 13 floors, roughly 20% of our building. Fan speeds were reduced on those floors, and we locked out elevators. This essentially also allowed us to optimize building startup and shut down critical equipment to reduce our energy consumption. All in all, we saved roughly $1 million in our electric consumption, which was roughly 11% of our pre-pandemic level. I think that goes as a case study to your point, John, taking action with the data in real time.
And Matt, as an occupier, obviously a ton of equipment had to be left on in order to support a work from home environment. Can you speak to that in terms of, the difference between an unoccupied building and a vacant building?
Yeah, look, every building is designed a little bit differently. I think the beauty that we have, because we're both the owner or the operator and the occupier, is really the fundamental difference between what we're able to do, where we don't have lease commitments. We essentially have flexibility to service our employees, to create change on the fly, to basically pivot them to other floors and other components of a building that we have that control, where in a traditional landlord or tenant, you're a little bit more handcuffed to the rules that you can break. I would say that's probably foundationally the biggest difference that I've observed.
Yeah, and Ed, your Durst family is very much like the Rudin family in terms of being privately owned and running our portfolio in a way that keeps the forebears very proud. Obviously, we look at when we put the pie of energy consumption of a building, roughly 60% to tenant, 40% to core. How has this exercise and this competition helped you galvanize a view towards that? And ultimately, what's the messaging that you have to our friends in government?
Thanks, John. And first off, also, again, thank you and congratulations to the 4 finalists here. I think everyone did a fantastic job. And thanks to the, over 100 attendees that we have on the phone today. I think the messaging is pretty simple, and it's not necessarily new, but I think it's got some renewed vigor behind it now, is that this energy, this energy conundrum in buildings is not just, you can't focus on a single party here. There are a lot of different aspects to buildings at play. And where we found really amazing success is where we've been able to engage tenants and come at this from a common goal of energy reduction and a common goal of carbon savings. And thankfully now that discussion is happening not so much, only targeted at landlords now, but a lot of companies that are undertaking ESG goals, et cetera, are finding themselves, even on the tenant side, working to reduce their own carbon footprint. And where we found great opportunities is working with them to do things like LED lighting retrofits, to help out with controls inside of their space, to help them synergize a little bit better with the landlord controlled systems. And that's really I think where the future of this goes is getting deeper into the tenant operations and working together to come to some really amazing solutions.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Dana, you've been a leader at Empire State in terms of renewable energy. As we all of us as owners and JPMC, we're the big leaders in this in terms of the purchase of their River Run Hydro in upstate New York to feed their portfolio here in New York. But as more and more tenants begin to reach out to their owner and say, hey, my CEO just declared that we're going to be carbon neutral by 2025 or 2030. What is owner, you, Rudin, Malkin, Durst, what are you doing to help us get there? Can you speak to that in terms of the messaging of what this brings back to the real estate industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that all of the different tools presented by the finalists today, are on the right track of helping with that. Because as landlords, I think we are responsible to lead, to create roadmaps, to create plans, and to engage our tenants and guide them, right? It's highly likely that tenants, even big ones, might not be experts in technology, real estate, and mechanical systems and the way to optimize the whole building. But I think that we have a huge opportunity to share with them when they say, we have this net zero plan as a tenant, or we are disclosing on ESG as a tenant. It's our job to help them. Their biggest usage or impact is the space they lease from us. So it's our responsibility, I think, to do everything that we can to reduce energy emissions, water waste, and share that with them. And then it's also, I think, our responsibility to create the tools and the data collection to engage with them where it's not necessarily in our control, and to engage them to say, we've seen this in your space. Will you partner with us to be more efficient in the way you use energy? Would you consider maybe not setting yourself at 66 degrees in the summer? Or can we look at turning your equipment off when you're not in the space? And also perhaps we can help you calculate your own EUI. In the case of some of our buildings, certainly in the JP Morgan Chase buildings and in some of Durst buildings, we have some very dense tenant loads. That doesn't mean they're inefficient. It just means they're dense. And I think that working with them to identify, data center usage, trading floor usage, cooking and meal prep usage, and to understand how you can even be more efficient for sure in those dense usages. There's a lot of opportunity for us to leverage the kinds of tools we saw today to communicate more effectively with our tenants on action items, both on the technical side and the behavioral side.
That was interesting.
They're the ones that save that money, right, John?
That 1 meter that everybody kept pointing to clearly had to be connected to some server or data facility that was never turned off. So
it happens all the time, right?
Again, more data, right? More granular data, knowing what was ultimately connected to that meter would have been very helpful in the analysis. Matt, JPMC, unbelievable leadership in terms of procuring renewable resources. What have you learned from that? How do you bring that? And then ultimately, what is this? What the competition that we've seen today? How does that help you in that endeavor?
Yeah, I'll make it short and sweet. So I would say the message for the real estate industry is you better have control over your data. It's essential. It's a game changer. Occupancy is important. If you don't have the tools in place to collect your occupancy and integrate that to an optimization tool similar to those that were demonstrated today, I think you're a lagger. And then there are companies out there that can help you achieve your goals. Those that participated today, amongst others, it's best to partner with them strategically and tactically to achieve your goals. And I think that's how I would summarize it, short and sweet.
Thanks, Matt. And Durst, obviously, people may not know this, but the leader of your company, Douglas Durst, is one of the largest, I think, the largest organic farmer in the state of New York. So he doesn't just talk the talk; he walks the walk. what messages do you have for the real estate industry and our friendly and unfriendly competitors out there?
We're all friendly competitors. I don't know what you mean. No, the message is, I think, our Dana and Matt have put it very well. The message is short and sweet. It's get to know your buildings, get to know your tenants, understand what's happening in them, where you can economize, and likewise, where you can really be here to help your tenants do the best that they can inside the space provided. It's a joint game here. There is no side on this. It's very easy to try and, push responsibility off to one party or another. But all of us have to kind of, reach out, reach up, and work towards this common goal of decarbonizing our buildings. And I think it's possible. It's a multifaceted approach, right? We're talking about what the grid's doing. We're talking about what's happening inside of our buildings. We're talking about how our tenants are using their spaces, when they're using their spaces, and how we can, best operate to accommodate them. And likewise, how they can pass data up to us so that we can work the best that we can.
Thanks for that, Ed. Last but not least, we've got 5 minutes left, but I think the messaging that this group gives back to the PropTech community is really, really important. We look at the 4 finalists. We have a company that's owned by one of the largest corporations in the world. I think the Google or Alphabet market cap is somewhere close to $2.6 trillion. We have Trane, which is a large manufacturer of air conditioning, HVAC systems and building management systems, a global company. And then we have AKF, which is an international engineering firm, well established. And then last but not least, we have a New York City born and bred startup named Prescriptive Data that really came out of conversations within the REBNY tech community. What message is, to me, the good news is, full disclosure, I'm obviously very close to our friends at Prescriptive Data, but what messages do you have to the smaller startup community in terms of types of products? Can you compete against the big guys? I'm so proud that Prescriptive Data is in there swinging against some really big, well-capitalized companies. But Dana, you want to start it off in terms of what the messaging and what you saw in terms of the PropTech community with this challenge?
Sure. Well, I thought all of the responses were great. Really, congratulations to the 4 finalists. And we looked at all of the participants, and some of them were individuals, and everybody's submittal was great. And so I think that even when you look at the finalists, there's still small teams mostly who really worked on the intensive development. So I would say that most of the flexible innovation we've seen does come from small companies or small groups within big companies, right? In my experience, the bigger companies are not always the best innovators because they have a hard time pivoting and customizing. And I think that that's one of my messages is, while your algorithmic baseline work may be consistent in the tools which you develop, make sure that these tools are able to work within the behavioral and technical idiosyncrasies of different buildings and their tenants. They're not all the same.
So find out what problems owners care about. And
one size does not fit all.
Problems.
Right. But the general concept is take hundreds of thousands of data points and put them in the actionable form.
Yeah. Matt.
I love what you said, John and Dana. I'll piggyback off of what you said. So, kudos to small companies like Prescriptive Data and Sidewalk Labs that can just compete against these large institutions. I think organizations like that should just continue to keep plugging in and competing, because there are large organizations like ourselves that enjoy working with small, nimble organizations because we're so clunky and cumbersome ourselves that they actually help us navigate through the truth. So I think just keep plugging and keep competing.
Thanks, Matt. Ed.
The agility point is really, I think, where it comes into play here. If there are there are 50,000 skyscrapers in New York City. There are 50,000 unique skyscrapers in New York City. Not one of these buildings is like, and I think, frankly, that's what makes our city fantastic and amazing. And likewise, even though maybe Rudin and Durst have similar ownership structures and that they're private, and Chase is going to be a whole other animal because they're an owner occupier. ESRT is going to be a publicly traded company that has a whole different set of rules and regulations around it. So be prepared, no matter how similar a company or building may seem on the outside, be prepared and be agile enough to adapt to whatever the client's need may be, and know that those needs are going to be, varied every time you pick up another phone or open up another email. You will have a different request. So be ready to change, be ready to adapt. But most importantly, keep pressing and keep pushing and keep on doing amazing work. I mean, what we saw here today was, I think, just a small piece of what data and what analytics and what small tech companies can do to push the market forward.
Well, to my judges, the 3 out of the 8 judges that basically voted on this, again, thank you for participating in this panel. Sandy has just come back on the screen to give me the hook. I think I did my job in getting us in and out and trying to unpack as much as we could in 20 minutes. My final words are, there's no such thing as too much bandwidth, and there's no such thing as too much data. So as we get more and more granular data, and as we expand our wireless networks using things like CBRS, we're going to be able to get granular data, deliver it into products, and work with our tenants to ultimately solve these issues that we're trying to solve. So thank you all very much on behalf of the REBNY Tech Committee. Really proud to be part of today. Thank you all.
I want to